Hell's Half Mile was a red light district that was famously known in downtown Bay City during the lumbering period. So roughly between the 1860s through the 1890s, but this district kind of eventually died off after World War I. But during the 19th century, during the peak lumber era, thousands and thousands of lumbermen would come back to Bay City from the northern timberlands after working an entire season in the woods. And they would spend their entire season's paycheck, so anywhere between $75 to $200, depending on what source you're looking at. Long story short, not a lot of money. And they would spend it here within a week. They spent it on booze, they spent it on food, they spent it on prostitution, they spent it on gambling, they rented hotel rooms, dancing, any kind of fun and sin and vice you could think of, they spent it here. Other towns such as Saginaw and Muskegon also had a period of salaciousness like this, kind of like a known district. The Bay City was the largest and most well-known because it was the largest, closest city that contained two things you typically could not find at a lumber camp, and that was whiskey and women. One of the well-known women of this district was Kit or Kate Lapham. Was a lady in her 20s during the 1890s. Little else is known about her outside of her public and criminal acts. In 1891, it was reported she lived in a house in a, quote, alleyway between Adams and Jefferson Streets, 100 feet north of 3rd Street. Bay City Times, September 26, 1891. Today, ironically, this is around the Bay County Sheriff's Department. She did not appear to be a prostitute, but was often involved in criminal acts on Hell's Half Mile. The Bay City Times wrote several stories about her and her public court cases in the 1890s, and sometimes she was reported as Kit Lapham, sometimes it was Kate Lapham. I'm not sure if she tried to change her name depending on the journalist reporting the story, or if the journalists were just kind of reporting their stories phonetically and writing down what they heard. So the Social Saloon was one of the many saloons that made up Hell's Half Mile. It is often referenced as being amongst the most notorious, dirty, and rotten of the era, but in actuality, anything and everything on Water Street was equally bad, if you ask me. The Social Saloon was one of the many saloons that made up this district. For reference, this would be where the Comfort Inn and 7th Street are today, or kind of where they meet in that general area. Kit or Kate Lapham was seen here smashing out the windows with a club wearing only red undergarments in broad daylight. Her actions were observed by a passing policeman. Her face was also reported to have been badly scratched and bleeding from a previous altercation. Other furniture inside had been badly damaged or turned over, it was reported. It was also reported that her lover, Ed Tierney, had knocked her down and struck her in the face, which is why she was bleeding. When the policeman came up to her and said, "Lady, what in blazes are you doing? It's broad daylight, you're half naked, I smell liquor on your breath, you're destroying property, what's going on?" She said, quote, "If I cannot get satisfaction out of the proprietor, I will out of his property," end quote. Interpret that how you will. Ed swore that he was done with her after this, however, this soon proved to be a repeat issue. She was closed and brought down to the station where she was charged for being drunk and sentenced to 20 days in jail. The notorious Kit Lapham, as she was known by locals in her court cases, were watched closely by residents of both the Bay Cities, Bay City and West Bay City on the west side of the river at the time. As whatever involved her, the details were juicy and the people just ate that up. A court case ensued where Ed Tierney denied he had ever done such a thing to her, despite her face being slashed. Ironically, she was bailed out by Ed. This drama came as no surprise to locals. It turns out there was a history of these two fighting. Kit was also a kleptomaniac. She was often arrested for stealing things such as gold watches, money, and jewelry. Once, angered she had been caught, cursed, yelled, and screamed so loud the entire police station could hear her. So terrible were her comments, the Bay City Times even wrote a story on that and said, quote, "The vile talk in which the women indulged in was something shocking," as described by the Times. There are several other stories about Kit Lapham from around Hell's Half Mile. While we do not know much about her outside of the district, her name and her lover's, Ed Tierney, seem to pop up numerous times during the 1890s involving her crimes and court cases. One such court case, ranging between February 7th and 15th, 1894, involved Kit Lapham and Ed Tierney again being arrested at 3:35 a.m. on February 7th. The Bay City Times acknowledged that Kit was well known in Bay City for misbehaving. Ed Tierney is reported as the keeper of the Oak Hall Saloon that was said to be at the corner of 4th and Water Streets. Both were reported to be intoxicated at the time of arrest. At the same time, Kit herself was out on a $500 bond for robbing a marine engineer in the hotel rooms above the Oak Hall Saloon not too long prior to this incident. Her and Ed may have been a team of sorts. During those early morning hours, Ed and Kit got into a lover's quarrel, resulting in Ed beating Kit. Her head was cut and her torso was bruised, it was reported. Kit was consigned to the lockup and Ed was sent to the stateroom next to the office. They remained separated until the arraignment. During this time, Ed had somehow gotten a liquor bottle to drink from. It is unsure how this happened, as it was illegal for prisoners to have liquor while locked up, according to the Bay City Times. Kit was taken to the office where Ed was kept, and while she was in the room, Ed dumped a glass of water on her. In the police court, the chief argued for Ed to be charged with assault and battery and Kit with drunkenness. During the case, Ed and Kit exchanged words with one another until Chief Nathaniel Murphy stopped in and ordered them quiet, or else he would twist Ed's neck. This seemed to shut them up. Kit was sentenced to 20 days in jail, and Ed was adjourned until the following day. On the 13th, Kit was bailed out through the influence of Ed, it was reported. The Bay City Times even noted that the people of a town would be watching this case, as it was common knowledge that tyranny seemed to get away or get out of situations. As to why, it is unknown, it says. By the 15th, Ed was freed and Kit dropped the complaint against him for beating her. This case is, quote, is not a surprise to the people of Bay City, end quote, it was reported by the Times. Apparently, Kit had withdrawn her complaint and claimed to be satisfied. Kit's total came to $3, and her bills were reported as being crisp. After being released, Ed ran up to reporters working on the case and demanded they change their facts about what had happened. Even obvious facts like Kit's face, which was now scarring from the altercation, and this seemed to happen a lot. Patrolman Bentley, who arrested the two, called Ed a damn liar for telling the reporter to change his story. The judge scolded at the officer for his language. Even the police were not totally happy about how this case turned out. Stories like this and much more can be heard on my Hell's Half Mile walking tours. The Bay County Historical Society schedules public walking tours May through October, and private tours can also be scheduled. Same rates apply. If interested, please contact the museum for more information.